It's the boy, Bubba, let's coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba, let's. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake.
And welcome back to another episode of the Bubba Lutz Sports Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Bubba Lutz. Brought over a brand new guest once again this week. We started off with Kevin earlier in the week, one of my friends, and now, honestly, this is probably the most special guest that we've had on the podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, thought about it, and obviously circumstances made it impossible for a lot of reasons, but this is the best that we can do. But this is Alex Navarro. And if you guys didn't go to Hanks, if you guys weren't really good friends with me at Hanks, or have just been joining the podcast as we go along, Alex Navarro is my journalism teacher when I was a part of Scriptoria, Hanks Media, which was the media program over at Hanks High School. As most of you know, I ran that sports program pretty well. But this was the man in charge of everything, and he was my teacher for all 4 years, whether it was from Scriptoria or just like regular classes. And honestly, I probably haven't said this to you, but you are the main reason why I do this podcast and why I've continued my journalism career. It's all because of you that pushed me very hard. And I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is kind of go down memory lane and look at some stories that whether you have them or I have them, and kind of relive the moments in a way.
That's actually very humbling to go ahead and hear. I know that in the time that you were with me, I knew that you always had to drive to want to excel in journalism. I knew that you did. So that the issue was never like, I got to motivate this guy to become the best version of himself. I already knew right off the bat that that's nothing. I didn't have to work on that end to be able to go ahead and do that, or to have to figure out a way to go ahead and motivate you to figure that out, because you were driven enough coming in your freshman year. You were very specific in terms of what you told me, what you wanted to do. So it was just a matter of just continuing to point you in the right direction and allow the plethora of mistakes to be made. But in that, you had an opportunity to go ahead and learn and to really establish your voice on who you wanted to become professionally. Mm-hmm. So this is exciting. I'm really excited to join you here on this podcast. Yeah, so let's have at it, man. Let's see where this goes.
And with that said, this is episode 140. So wow. A nice little milestone there to really cap this off with. But like you mentioned, like you didn't feel that you need to motivate me. Obviously, I felt like you did. I felt like it was necessary for you to be very honest and very blunt with me, because I remember the mistakes more than I did the kind of success and more of the milestones that we had together. I remember those moments where you made me feel like I wasn't doing good enough. And that's what I needed, honestly. I didn't feel motivated to the same level as a lot of the other people wanting to do what I do at that time. But like you said, like you felt from the very beginning that I didn't need motivation. Was there kind of like a moment or like a certain memory that you had early on when we were together that you felt like you didn't need to do anything with me?
Well, in terms of motivation, no. There was never a moment whenever I was like, okay, I need to motivate this kid. That didn't happen. There was times when your writing or your dedication to the craft was lazy. Mm-hmm. But that's typical. If I'm looking at a 14-year-old kid, whenever you join me, you were 14, 15, between 14 to 18. That's typical of a teenager. Like, in other words, sometimes I'm going to go ahead and get subpar work, and that's just not from you specifically. That's from a lot of my students, and a lot of my students who ended up going, they graduated from Ivy League schools. They've gone on to Stanford. They've gone on to Rice. There were times whenever I can notice that I was like this. I know his work, and I know this is not his best work.
Yeah.
So I remember it was like your sophomore year. What was it? It was
Well, that was the
and I
first
don't
year
know.
I was in Scriptoria, so
Yes.
this is where
Okay.
a
So
lot of the mistakes come into play.
yes, but you know what's funny, and it's there's nothing wrong with actually remembering the mistakes. I don't know if you know this, but Pat Riley, a famous coach, because well, I mean, obviously he's now the president of operations for the Miami Heat, but Pat Riley, when I was growing up, he was the coach of the Lakers.
Hmm.
Okay, so when he was the coach of the Lakers, I think at one point either he was interviewed when he was with the Lakers or when he was the head coach of the Knicks or the head coach of the Heat, and he said, I don't enjoy the wins, but I do dread over the losses.
Hmm.
So he remembers the losses. He doesn't necessarily he'll be the first one to tell you, he's like, I don't remember the wins, I remember the losses. So it's similar to the mistakes. You don't remember you mostly remember what you got wrong, more so than you're gonna remember what you got right, because if you got it right, you're on to the next thing, you're on to the next project, you're on to the next deadline. But whenever you get something wrong, when a mistake is made, that gives an opportunity for it to be something that can be corrected. And so I remember early on, I think, man, I remember, and I went home and I was like, I knew by doing this, I I took a chance, but it was a calculated risk. I think one time it was like sometime October, like it was your second year with me, so it was your sophomore year, it was your first year in Scriptoria. And I remember it was sometime in October, and you ended up like submitting a sports article, and you pretty much just kind of mailed it in. And I saw it and I read it, and I remember because I remember printing it, and then once I printed it, I crumbled it up and I tossed it at you by your computer because you sat in the same place for the same three
Yeah.
years in Scriptoria.
Yeah. Before we moved rooms.
Yeah. So what's interesting, I got that paper and I tossed it at you right in that front row, and I tossed it and I hit you. And I go, that's exactly what I think of your work. And you opened it up and you saw the article, and you didn't say anything to me. You went back and you ended up actually you went back and you made edits to that story. And then after you ended up making edits to that story, I think that was the last time that I had to tell you that it's either you're gonna bring it to the best of your ability. I'm not saying that every piece you're going to write is gonna win you the Pulitzer. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But every piece that you write better be the best version of that piece that you're gonna submit.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I pushed that on you. There's a handful of students that I can go back and I can remember that I pushed to the point that I'm like, I want this guy to be so pissed off at me, not because of the fact that I want to go ahead and I don't want to pretend like his work isn't exceptional. I want to make sure that he understands is like, look, you have a gift here, and part of my responsibility is to make sure that you figure out where that gift fits in what you want to do.
Hmm. Yeah. Like not put myself in a position where I'm like on cruise control and
Yeah.
feel like I'm in a good place. Like, no, I wanted to continue to get better.
Yeah, and I remember we had this talk at one point because you told me right off the bat, like your freshman year, that you wanted to go work for ESPN, and I was like, excellent. So, and then I think one of the first things I told you, I was like, excellent. I go, so do a lot of other people in the country.
Hmm.
I go, so you have to decide how how far are you willing to push yourself, because the second you take a day off, or the second you mail one in, or the second you actually you put it on cruise control, um, somebody's not on cruise control and they're passing you on the left lane.
Hmm.
So that's definitely the one point that I wanted to go ahead and make sure that you always understood that. Yeah, go ahead. You're more than welcome to go ahead and mail it in. That's going to be 100% your choice. But at the end, when either you're being offered the position or you're not being offered the position, understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely been there. I mean, like, honestly, I haven't told many people this, but I did interview for like a editing job over at Dallas Morning News. I mean, you were the person that actually introduced me to the Dallas Morning News for my football job, but they had an opening and I tried it out. Look, I was nowhere near qualified and I was nowhere close to getting that job, but I was just like, hell, why not? You know,
Yeah.
at least what I wanted, because I was emailing the main like advisor for the job, and they told me like, look, we felt that there were some other candidates that were better. And honestly, I was not even close to being upset or down on myself. I just honestly said, you know, what do you feel like I need to work on? That's all I needed to know. That's all I wanted as a response. And that's all I got. So I was happy enough to just go with that and kind of move on, but also learn from it. There's honestly one time when I was in your class. Well, there was multiple, but I think this one stood out the most. Was I think it was junior or senior year. It was definitely in the new room, so that's why I remember this.
Okay.
But I remember us having the deadline on Friday, and then it was most likely Monday when we came in. You talked in front of the class, and you just called me out. And it was rightfully so to do that, because in that story that was done, I did not do my best. And I felt it immediately. I knew I was going to get chewed out, but I just didn't know how you were going to do it. But it was honestly the best way of doing it, because I was so mad at myself that I knew I needed to bounce back. It was you standing in front of the class, and you're going through everyone. You're like, of course we had Maddie, Christy, and Andrea next to me, and you're saying, all right, good job, guys. And then you got to me, you're like, Bubba, I'm disappointed. That's all you need to say, but I felt the tone in your voice, and I just looked down. I was so ashamed, because I let you down, but I also let everyone else down, because I had to set the example too. I was an editor at that time.
Yeah, sure.
And I couldn't, order someone or tell someone to do this or that when I can't even get the job done. So
that's right. Yeah.
I need to come back from that. And I felt like that was the last time that I felt that I really let everyone down, because after that, I was just nonstop. I was tired of being like in a cruise control or in a, like, I can make the mistakes. I just need to get it done.
Sure.
And that was the best way of doing it. It may not have worked for every single person in that classroom, because there was a lot of people that were softer and they were not willing to have that type of honesty.
Well, you have to. One of my responsibilities is I have to know where to push the buttons. So, for example, if you actually bring up Andrea, if you bring up Maddie, I remember I had a student years before you. I think she was class of 2012, where she was a phenomenal writer. And when I got her article for Scriptoria, and I read it, and when I came back, I just looked at her and I told her, I said, this is so disappointing. And right in front of me, she started crying, but I didn't do it in front of anybody else. I just did it in front of her, knowing that the possibility existed that I was going to get that reaction. Mm-hmm. So part of being a teacher, or part of being like a leader of people, whether it's teenagers, whether it's in a school setting, whether it's in a business setting, is you have to understand how to approach the people who work with you. So I knew that was going to light you up. I knew that if I approached somebody else in that same manner, I would have probably lost them. Mm-hmm. I remember my second year in education, I was coaching freshman boys basketball over in San Eli. And there was a player that I had by the name of Caesar. So Caesar he was good. He had a jump shot. He was kind of like Rip Hamilton. I don't know if you remember him from the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah.
Not much of a three-point shooter, but he had that mid-range game that was just like on point. It was clean. So his game was like that. So it was interesting, because when I would put him in the game, he would hesitate. And I think Phil Jackson one time said he used to call Sasha Vujicic. So he used to call Sasha. He used to call him what do you call him? He called him an afternoon player, because basketball games in the NBA are at 7:00 at night. Practice in the NBA is at noon.
Yeah.
So Phil Jackson, he says, okay, he's like, man, your best moments are at noon. So that was kind of a way to motivate him, because it's like, for whatever reason, and we've all known these, we've heard these stories where he was so good at practice, and all of a sudden we get to the game and then he freezes. And I'm like, so I'm talking to him, and at one time it was up against Clint, so it was like our big rival, San Eli versus Clint. And I call a time, I put him out there, and He's doing what he's doing, and I'm like, what the absolute heck? So I call a timeout, and as he's walking off, everybody walks off, and I just start chewing his butt right on the court, and I started chewing his butt, and you could, for whatever reason, I guess that's maybe the first time I've learned. I learned also when the next time when we were out of a timeout, he went out and scored 6 straight buckets. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, so this worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was 15 years ago when I'm like, okay, so for some people you can motivate in private, and then some people it's you need to motivate them in public, and it's you just as again as a leader of people you have to kind of figure out, or as a coach you have to figure out exactly where that's going to fit.
Yeah. And personally, like at that time, like I was like kind of growing out of my shell. Yeah, I think the Hanks Media like account and kind of getting the publicity that we did helped me grow out of my shell. So I was already like in a good spot, and I felt like, oh, then people know about us, and to have that publicly. I felt like either way, if you would have done privately or publicly, I would have taken it, and I would have been like, okay, no, we're doing this because we're on the same page.
Yeah,
like, we're definitely on the same page. We know where I want to go, and that's why I just gravitated to you from the very beginning, because we both knew we got along. I mean, it was instant. Do you still remember the first time that we met? I remember like walking into your class. No, it was the first day of my freshman year, and you were my 7th period, so you were the last class of the day, and obviously my sister told me about you. She was like, he's a great teacher and you're gonna have a lot of fun with him, plus he's a journalism teacher. So I was like, cool, like we're on the same page here. But as soon as I walked in, I remember immediately walked in the room, straight left, and then kind of toward the back, because I was like, I mean, it was freshman year.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, so it was very different from where I sat sophomore year, because I knew I needed to be more toward the front. But I went straight left, kind of all the way in the back. That's where I met Maddie. And from that point on, like, you said my name. You were like, Lutz, isn't your sister Jennifer Lutz? And at that time, Navarro, I hated being compared to my sister. Yeah. I hated it because I wanted to make a name for myself. She just graduated the year before, and all I was known as Jenny's sister or Jenny's brother.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make a name for myself there. And so when you told me, oh, you're Jenny's brother, I was like, yes. But like, I was very angry at the time. And then I don't know if you said it or I said it, but I was like, I prefer Bubba. And you're like, Bubba. Okay, Bubba. And you just kept saying it over and over. And then from that point on, like, we just got along because we started talking sports. We fell in love with that. But from that point on, like, you took me under your wing, and toward the tail end of freshman year, you told me, like, look, I'm thinking about putting you in the scriptoria class, but you got to know, this is not easy. And I was like, oof, okay. That's a lot to take in. But I knew that even at such a young age, like, I needed to do something in order to kind of progress and get to where I wanted to be. But from that point on, I felt like we were just on the same page, and no matter what we did, we'd always end up there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I would actually have the conversation with people who I would consider to bring into Scriptoria the following year. I would tell them, I said, it's not going to be easy. I even think in your at the senior banquet, you're at the end at the senior banquet when we had it over at what was it? The pizza place. Mi Italia or
Mi Italia, yeah.
Yeah, so like when we had it there, yeah. The Italia Cafe, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's it's because I think was it how many years after when did you graduate?
2016.
So the year after is like when I left, the year after. So I stayed there one more year and I left after that.
Yeah.
So the year after, that's when I said, it's it's not easy what I put these kids through. Yeah, I go, but I know there's a reason why I do it. Because when they leave my class, it's like I believe that I can prepare them or my class can prepare them to handle some of the challenges that they're going to face when they go out to the real world, whether it's college, whether it's just finding your niche, because there's so many things that you have to learn. If you're going to go to college, I know that you better be able to write in order to pass my class.
Mm-hmm.
That's first and foremost. Second one is you better figure out how to work with others, because you can't do it all on your own. See, that's the one thing that I don't know if you all ever got, because I guess I set up the foundation enough that I kept on thinking, I said, if y'all don't figure out how to work together, it's just going to be that much harder when you leave, because eventually, A, you're going to have to network, or B, you're going to have to collaborate with other people to go ahead and get the job done. There's just no way around it. You can't do everything on your own. So that's kind of the reason why I ended up setting up Hanks Media that way, because you had to depend on other people. So think about it. Writers were not allowed to take photos. Mm-hmm. Photographers were not allowed to write their stories. And that was intentional, because I needed for you to rely on somebody else to go ahead and help you. And it was built that way. So you really have to start breaking out of your shell in order to go ahead and do that. You just can't be in that class. I remember there was a student. Were you with me already? No, I think he graduated in 2012 or 2013. His name was Topher.
That was right before I got there. Yeah.
Okay, so Topher, he was with me for all 4 years, kind of similar to what you did. Freshman year and then the last 3 years he was with me. So his writing was just atrocious. And it wasn't as much as he wasn't trying. I just think it wasn't clicking. Like for you to be you know what's funny? Well, I guess I'll get to that point later on, but his senior year, everything just kind of fell together for him. And he just started writing, and something just clicked, and he ended up becoming my most improved. But what's interesting is I told him at the beginning, I said, it's not going to be easy. It's really not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. And I'm kind of curious as to where his writing is now. I'm kind of curious as to what he's done with his life now. I haven't kept in touch with all my students after they've graduated, but I knew that once he graduated from my class, I knew that he was going to be ready to go ahead and take on any challenges if college was going to be his thing, or if he was going to go ahead and go to like a professional setting where he would have to go ahead and figure out how to work, how to play nice with other people.
Yeah. And I have so many experiences like that to where your class helped me later on. Like, I remember taking the intro to media writing class in college, and I was like, so I'm just going to do what I did for 3.5 years at Scriptoria at Hanks. And the professor was going through the guidelines and making sure, like, this is what you need to do in a story. I mean, we spent like 2 months on just basic writing, because that's how bad it was kind of in that class, to where a lot of people just didn't know how to do it.
This is at your school?
This is at UNT, yeah.
Really?
And this was like a year or two into the program. This is into Mayborn. So at this point, I'm thinking everybody's on board. Everybody knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that once you get to UNT, it's like everybody's kind of where you are, like, give or take some leeway.
Yeah.
But by and large, for the most part, they have a really good understanding of what the class requires.
For sure. And so in those first few months, I was like, I know this. Like, maybe some rust, maybe some kinks that I need to work out. But as far as like knowing what to write and knowing how to write it, I was on board. I knew what I was doing. And when she said max 400 words stories, and I'm like, I'm sorry? It was minimum 600 back in the day. So if you think I'm going to struggle here, oh no. Yeah. And I wasn't perfect, because she was pretty strict. And I like that. Sure. I like the strict professor. Because she saw the potential in me too. And there were some things to where, like, you would have gotten it, but she didn't. She was kind of like more old school. So I remember the one thing I remember from her class was I wrote a story, and this was kind of a weird situation, but kind of a coincidence, how I was working at a sports apparel store at the time. And I was struggling to find a story. I just needed to find a story. I knew as soon as I found it, I would have been good. But I remember one night, a couple, like a husband and wife, came in, and they're looking for UNT stuff. And we just started asking them, like, why do you need it? Like, for your son. and they're like, oh, he's signing with UNT to play football. I was like, oh, that's awesome. What school do you go to? It's like Keller Timber Creek or whatever, which was like literally down the road. And I was like, what position? He's like, quarterback. Okay. And then I was like, what's his name? It's like Kobe Kraft. I was like, okay. Let me look into this a little bit. They were telling me how he broke records at the high school, like him and this one other guy were breaking records, the wide receiver too. I mean, they were putting up numbers. And they said like about 14 of these guys are going to go D1 from our football program. I was like, that's it. That's the story. Like that, I need your contact information. Let's do it right now. Remember going to their house, coolest people in the world. And I met the guy, and typical like high school jock, you know, like he's confident, he's cocky. Like,
sure.
Yeah, we've all been there. Like,
yeah.
I get it. I dealt with Hank's players. I know how to deal with this. Yeah. And so I wrote the story, and I remember one quote from that story, and that's how I ended the story. Was I asked him, you know, what do you want your legacy to be? Whether you make it to the NFL or not, because you're a smaller guy, you're kind of a Drew Brees type of guy.
Okay.
You know, what do you want? Well, what do you want it to be, whether it's local or at the UNT level? Because there's a competition at UNT at quarterback.
Sure.
And he was like, I just want to ball out. I'm like, perfect. That's how I would have answered that. I want to ball out.
Sure.
And so I wrote that story, and when I gave it to her, the next day she came in, she circled that entire quote. She's like, what does that mean? I was like,
oh.
Like literally, like, what does it mean? It means like, just want to play. Like, you just want to go. Yeah. And she was like, okay. And I'm like, I'm going to run it. Like, I need to run it because I guarantee you a lot of people will get it.
A lot of people, people will get that.
And I think that's where, like, my writing is kind of segmented to sports specifically, because if you don't understand the realm of sports, you don't get that. And she didn't get that. But you would have gotten that. You would have been like, that's great. Let's run with that.
Yeah. So, that's a great quote.
Yeah. So it's like the adjustment was kind of tough, but the basics and the foundation was there. And so I loved it. I knew what I was doing, and I just felt like I just rolled with it. And I felt so comfortable just because I had done it for so many years with you. But I mean, no matter what I did in college, it wasn't going to beat what I did with Hanks Media and Scriptoria. Because honestly, I think about those moments all the time.
Do you really?
100%. I was looking at my Instagram account, and I saw a picture of the boys basketball team, and it was them, you know, grouped together like a prayer right after the game. It was after their loss. I want to say my junior year. Okay. Because I think they barely made the playoffs, but then they lost in the first round, whatever. And they were all huddled in, and I remember, I mean, that first year, I couldn't do football because I was in band. And
I remember, yeah.
And so all I could do that year, in my sophomore year, was basketball. And I was shy. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. You just said, free reigns, here's a Twitter account, don't be stupid. I was like, oh, crap. I might screw this up, which, in fairness, there was some times where you had to back me up.
Well, yeah, you can't keep calling a running back Butterfingers.
Look, man.
I said, look, we all knew that guy could not it was a given that he was going to fumble at least 2 to 3 times a game.
Yeah.
But I know we all know who we're talking about, but I was like, this guy, I go, he's going to find you in school. And then at that point I said, if you want quotes or anything else from everybody else, there is a way. I go, and I was like, look, instead of saying Butterfingers, can you go ahead and say something else?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I remember that. I think I texted you right away. I'm like, yeah, you may not want to say that again.
And then also Miss Deloach did too.
She told you.
She texted me during the game. She's like, don't do it. Don't do that again. And I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, the football team hated me. But the basketball team, when I would do that to the basketball team, they would joke around with me. So that's where I was kind of like more comfortable with them. The baseball team, they took it a little bit, but I had a lot of friends on there. But the sophomore year, I remember like going to the locker room. I was talking to Coach Flores, and I just remember them like bringing me in and just kind of giving me an opportunity to really like benefit not only them, but also give me a platform to really give me like kind of like more confidence. and kind of get more comfortable with the whole fact that I'm covering a team, being a beat writer of some sort. And so they took me in, and just like one of them. I felt like part of the team, and I remember us having to organize me going to the state tournament where we had to go to like Amarillo, I think. They had to play against Amarillo. I don't remember where they played, but we had to travel. And, you know, I was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to be able to go. But we made it happen. And I would travel with them on the bus. And I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Like, what if they actually win this game? Because then they got to, like, spend money on me. And I didn't feel comfortable with that. But unfortunately, they lost the first game. And after that game, we were in the locker room. We all got together. And, I mean, crying. I mean, that was the year that it was Andy Arias, Chris, Sapo.
That year.
It was a stacked squad. It was the year that we did the back-to-back-to-back article.
Correct.
Which was probably my favorite that I ever written under Scriptoria. Because I was just so close with those guys, and I still talk to them today. But it was probably... I grew a lot of friends from that. But I remember being on the bus, and right next to Andy. And at that point, Andy just didn't know what he wanted to do in life. I mean, one of the purest shooters that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
He was so talented. And he was telling me he got offers from this school. He might go D2, D3. And he's thinking, like, I don't want to play D2. I want to play D1. Like, that's my dream. And I'm like, I get that. I completely understand where you're coming from. He's like, I just don't want to play at all at that point if I don't play D1. I'm like, you got to understand that I've been a sports fan my entire life. And in my first year, I've grown close to him, close to all of those guys on the team. And he was obviously the best player out of all of them.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
I remember the Eastwood game, too, in the McDonald's tournament where he hit the buzzer beater. Still one of my favorite moments of all time.
Okay.
Like being on the sideline or being on the bench and watching it happen in front of my eyes was amazing against Eastwood too, let alone.
Yeah.
And so I told him, I was like, look, man, you are one of the most gifted players I've ever seen in my life. And for you to not play basketball at a higher level would be disappointing. Like to me and to everyone around you. I would not respect you if you do not play basketball at a higher level. Because I know that you can get better, but you are an amazing role player at least, but a tremendous like dynamic player.
Yeah.
So no matter where you're going, you need to play.
Sure.
And he was just like thinking about after the loss, you're kind of sad and you're down on yourself. I can understand that. But I remember saying that to him. And then from that point on, like he was like, I appreciate the talk. You know, that really helped. And then he did end up playing, you know, D2, D3. I can't remember, but it was like a school.
Where did he play?
I think it was in like Wisconsin. He traveled far because I remember he came back and visited in the locker room, and he was just like talking about how it's so much different over there. But he had to travel a long way. I believe it was Wisconsin. Okay. I should get him on the podcast. Why not? But I remember he came back and I was like, just how is it, man? Like, how do you feel? And he brought back the moment where I talked to him on the bus. And I was like, damn. Like that was a very special moment, not only for him, but for me, honestly. Because I felt like from that point on, I was a part of that team.
Sure.
Because the next 2 years, when Flo left, it was hard. But with the other coaches, you know, we got closer. And I thank him so much for every opportunity they gave me. Because I was there for every game. Every single game. They're like, get on the bus. Let's go. Wherever we're traveling to, we're going. And then, you know, if I wasn't there for a game, they would bash on me. Like, I remember I'd get sick like once a year, remember? Like, I would be gone for like a whole week. Yeah. Like, I was bad. And then I'd miss like the 1 or 2 games that week. And they're like, where were you? We needed you. That's why we lost. And like little things like that, like, that's what I loved. And being the writer for them and being the writer for like pretty much every team. It really, I enjoyed it because it gave me attention. Like, not gonna lie, like it was like, oh, Bubba's the sports guy. That's how it kind of grew around the city. But you also getting attention from like news outlets too, where we would talk to them and give them, you know, stats or information that
Sure.
that prepared me for what I'm going to do later on in my life, and I did it at 17, 18 years old. I
You know
shouldn't
what's funny?
I shouldn't be doing that.
What's interesting is that it took maybe like about 6 years just to break through with all the sports guys in El Paso. Just because at the beginning it's like, well, who's Hanks Media? There's such a there there's no reason why we should trust what they're giving us.
Hmm.
But I think once we kind of started sending them sports, sending them information, at that point we ended up actually becoming a an extension of what they were looking for, because now obviously you've seen it whenever you started working for the Dallas Morning News. You see it from that angle about working back with high school. Is like you really kind of need like that voice of the high school to kind of feed you all that information as
For
much as
sure.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember going to a lot of games, and they were telling me like this guy's gonna get recruited by this school, and I didn't know that, but it helped before the game. That way, I can focus in on that person and see what their stats are. That way, I can put it into the story, tie it in. So yeah, it's basically like how I was back then. I just did it on a very unique scale, or a unique way, because I need to add a little bit of humor to that. Definitely.
I'll give you a quick story. When I did my internship, I was at Cal State Fullerton, and then when I did my internship, I actually came back home and I did my internship at KDVC at Channel 4. So, and it was cool because like the very first day when I get there, I interviewed over the I interviewed over the phone, and I'm like, look, this is kind of what I'm looking to do. Is like I need internship hours, so you got to sign off on all this. The guy's like, yeah. At that time, the guy's name, the one who I did my internship with, his name was Richard Sines. He's a sportscaster in the Phoenix or Tucson area now. So he's still doing sportscasting till the day. So I get to El Paso like the very first day. we get home, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go check in. It was like 8 o'clock at night. I forgot. Oh no, I get there like in the afternoon. And then they're like, hey, welcome aboard. There's the van. Jump in the van. You're going to go do your first interview. Like, that's literally how I was, like, introduced to it.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, no, you're not going to just kind of, like, ease into it. And what's interesting is my first interview ever was Billy Gillispie.
Really?
Billy Gillispie at the time,
Awesome.
He was a week removed from being hired at UTEP to take over Jason Rapidu. Jason Rapidu was a horrible coach for UTEP. So they hire Billy Gillispie from the Kansas staff. He was under Bill Self.
Nice.
So they hire him. They bring him in. When they bring him in, a week later, they used to have a winter camp for kids. They used to call them. I think they were called like the little dribblers or like little minors.
Yeah, little minors. Yeah.
Little minors. So I interviewed him, and as I'm interviewing him, they were having the camp. What were they having the camp? Oh, I think they were having the camp at UTEP. So I show up, and I'm interviewing them, and then we just kind of hit it off. Not anything deep, but enough for him to believe that I was there just interviewing him like as a regular sportscaster, even though he had no clue that I was doing my internship.
Yeah.
That night, the big game of the week for El Paso was Hanks versus Coronado basketball. Guy Crenshaw was the coach of Hanks at the time. So the game of the week was Hanks versus Coronado, and that gym was packed. So all the news stations were there, and obviously we show up, and then lo and behold, Billy Gillespie's there. So I think you remember the way I used to dress to class. I also dressed that way for my internship. Uh-huh. I wore a shirt and tie for my internship. So I show up, and then I see Coach Gillespie there. I walk up to Coach Gillespie, and I'm like, hey, Coach, what's going on? And we're talking for like about, just dumb things for like about 5 minutes, right? Nothing big. But I think other people saw me speaking with Gillespie, thinking, because again, at this time, he's only a week in El Paso. So nobody's got a clue like who he hangs with.
Yeah.
So as Billy Gillespie leaves to go somewhere else, I forgot, I had a parent who ended up approaching me, and he's like all secretive. He's just kind of going up to me like this, like he's just going like this, and I was like, "What's this guy's problem?"
Like,
Yeah, he's like, and he goes like this. He's like, "Keep your eye on number 5 for Hanks." So that was his dad. So the dad was under the impression that I was one of Gillespie's assistant coaches.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Or like a
he's like,
recruit.
yeah. So he's like, keep your eye on 5. And you know what's funny is that guy ended up playing at UTEP.
That's
From Hank.
amazing. Yeah.
But I forgot his name. But I forgot his name, and I was like, why does that kid look familiar? He's like, oh, he went to Hanks, and I was like, oh, I remember him.
Mhm.
And that was actually his dad that approached me. He says, keep your eye on number 5. And little did he know that I had no affiliation with Billy Gillespie, other than the fact that I interviewed him like 4 hours before
Mhm.
over at UTEP. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess he was just kind of like learning the scope of the school, right, or
No,
of, the,
yeah.
of the city.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
might as well start off with the game of the week.
Sure,
Yeah. Man. Is that football or basketball?
basketball.
That was basketball. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there was. I definitely tried my best to actually like help out the players as much as I could. To honestly like help them with the news outlets and get their name out. It was a failed experiment whenever I put their Twitter names on there, because I remember. Do you remember Hunter? Hunter Biggs?
I remember Hunter.
Yeah. He had like pimp in his Twitter name. And it was like for a week or two, I remember putting on every single player's like Twitter names so that way they can get recognition. Everyone else was like good. Like Sapo was like Chris Delgado or whatever, and
Yeah,
then Hunter was like Swag Pimp or something. And then I remember being in the locker room and he's like, "Hey Bubba, can you not put my Twitter name on every tweet that involves me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, to be honest, if
Yeah.
you want to get recruited." But I mean, there was a lot of talent. There was a lot of talent at Hanks.
sure.
That
I kind of wonder. I mean, he stays competitive. I know he's got the program now. He stays competitive. I know he's lost some level of talent. I know he's lost some level of talent. I think like maybe Flows last year. I think we kind of started noticing little by little because again, there were so many schools being built east.
for sure.
You
Yeah.
know, at the point El Dorado started coming up, they started kind of dominating at one point.
East
Now
Lake.
you have East Lake.
Yeah.
Now you have Pebble Hills.
Yeah.
So you have all these schools that have started growing. Once they started growing east, so a lot of the talent ended up going in that direction as well. So you kind of noticed it. I think what's going to help. It's interesting because Eastwood just came out. They were like ranked a top 10 sports school in the state of Texas. But what's interesting is because you weren't around whenever we dropped in classification, right? What was your first year at Hanks?
Oh no, we dropped like 3 times when I was there.
We dropped once and then we went up again. So okay. So this is actually what ended up happening. So we dropped from 5A to 4A because our enrollment was just tanking.
Yeah.
So we dropped from 5A to 4A.
Which I was there
And then,
for.
correct. And then 2 years later, they reclassified everything. And we stayed technically with all those schools, but everything was named 5A. So we got reclassified twice in 2 years, even though the first time we dropped and we started playing against other teams. And then the second time we got reclassified to 5A, but we kept the same level of competition. So I thought that was actually kind of interesting. So that first year, I think it was 2012. I'm almost certain it was a year with Emilio Noriega. He was a quarterback.
Yes.
It was with Chris. It was with Chris Thummel the year before. They ended up. It was with. What was that running back? What was it? Running back Franklin. No, it wasn't Franklin. It was there was a running back. He just reminded me every time he ran. He just reminded me of the Juggernaut. He wasn't gonna make a lot of lateral moves, but just if you got in front of him, he's gonna run you over. So when we dropped in classification that first year, we did exceptional at a ton of sports. So the Eastwood just experienced the same thing. So what's interesting is when they experience the same thing, Eastwood just experienced it. So now next year they're going to go back up to 6A because their enrollment's back up.
For sure. Yeah.
And then what's interesting is Riverside dropping down to 4. So Riverside's down to like 1,100 kids maybe.
I feel like that was like a downward trend for sure. Like
they were
even
down,
throughout my time because they were going down already.
Well, and also if you're in the area, chances are you're going to go to Del Valle to play football.
That's true.
So but even though they have a good sports program over at Riverside, I'd say if you're going to play football, you were going to play for Jesse. You were going to play for Perales. The new coach, the jury's still out on the new coaches. He hasn't been. I think that he just finished his first year. So, but if you were going to play football, you were going to go play with Jesse. So that's everybody kind of knew that. So Riverside, East Sled, if you were good, chances are you were going to go play at Del Valle, and now that it's open district. So it's interesting. So I guess you caught a really good wave of a lot of really good sports.
Yes.
That were being played at Hanks.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't make it far, but at least to get to a certain point where they got their names out there. I think that was our best thing going for us as far as Hanks Media goes. And then just growing ourselves. Because, like, honestly, I still think it's a huge achievement for me to say whenever someone's saying, like, what's your criteria or what's your resume? I wouldn't say but we grew a Twitter platform that went from 30 followers when I first got my hands on it to 300, and it only grew from that point on.
Yeah, I wonder what it is now. I think it's well over 500 now. But I know obviously they're not as active as the both of us were.
I mean, we were on top of that. I was on that Twitter account more than my own, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same. You know, it's funny now because I'm actually bringing it up now. You know, what's funny is, I do a lot of what is it called? Like I do a lot of tweets, but I have to do what I'm figuring out is now in my position, there are 586 followers. That's not bad.
I mean, that's more than half of those came from our time. Way more than half.
Oh yeah, I think by the time I left, we were about 425, 450, something like that.
Yeah.
So So I think that's kind of where we were whenever we ended up doing it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember getting like some tweets like after I left. They're like, "Is this still Bubba that's tweeting?" I'm like, I'm not even in El Paso, so I don't think that's the case. God, I still think though that like Friday nights, whether it was basketball or football, that for me is like my comfort zone. That's where I belonged, because it didn't matter. Like I was there on the sideline. Everyone knew that I was going to be there. And
then it was actually pretty cool whenever we ended up getting Colink, because then at that point it was the both of you at every game. Yeah, so it was actually
and we just knew what we needed to do.
Sure.
He knew the angles to take pictures at. I knew where to be at on the field to see the play. And basically we were just a dynamic duo for sure.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. It took a while for me to. I think the one thing that I really needed to work on in my early days, in my early times, like being the sports reporter, was interviews. I hated interviewing. Not in the sense that like that whenever it came down to the interview, I didn't know what to do. I knew what to do. I knew what asking. I knew what questions to ask, but it was just the initial like conversation. Whether it was a coach, whether it was a player, I was terrified. So I would ask you a lot of the times to like get me the contact info or to give me their number when you were just like, just go up to them, and I'm like,
Yeah, no, I'm kind of wondering exactly. Like I think my last class ended up leaving there. Like my last set of graduates ended up leaving there in 2018. I think that was my last one because I didn't have anybody this year and I didn't have anybody the year before. No, 2019 was my last year. I ended up having a junior that was actually there that ended up leaving. Or that actually he was a sophomore when I left, so he had 2 years after me. So yeah, it was just a matter of, I'm just kind of curious the way the program is now. I don't know. I don't really keep in contact. You get so busy doing what I'm doing now that you really don't have an opportunity to go out and have contact with kind of what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see. I think at one point people were dropping off. They would still send me the magazine, so I kind of saw it. But it was one of those things. I think were you there when Amanda was still there? No, not Amanda. Who was our photographer? She would do a lot of the covers. Was it Amanda?
In Miranda?
Yes, Miranda Munoz. Yeah,
I think she was a junior when I graduated.
Yeah. So she's from time to time she'll drop off magazines so that way I get an opportunity to go ahead and see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. After a while, I kind of just saw that they were only doing like kind of small stuff. Like they would post the stories, and then they kind of got more generic. I know that was like a big thing when we were there, is that we can't do just generic stories, like a national news story, and not
Sure.
put our own twist on it. I did see
Sure.
a lot of that, and then I didn't see much on sports. And I was kind of like wondering like how they were gonna do, because that first year after I left, I think they barely won a game. The football program, I think they barely won like one game or two,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
it was before what it is now. Because I don't know if you know about the quarterback at Hanks now, but he's getting like recognition.
Yeah, that's my understanding. He's young too, right?
He's young. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think he's barely going to be a junior this year,
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. I think he's barely going to be a junior. Yeah, I believe that he's actually getting recognition. Yeah.
which is amazing because, like, in this part of Texas, like, if you get people from El Paso getting some buzz, that's amazing, because it's just, like, literally the talent here is undeniable. I've seen it firsthand, and I
Yeah.
cannot believe how good it is compared to El Paso. So if he's getting the attention, that's even
Sure.
better. So, yeah. Because, I mean, those are some rough years when we were doing it.
Yeah, I remember that.
We would win the easy games. You know, like, you can chalk those up like the Riverside, the Isleta, and you're like, okay. But then you see Del Valle, Coronado, Eastlake, you're like, all
Yeah.
right, let's see how bad the score is this week.
Yeah, you kind of knew already that going in, it's like the talent level wasn't going to be there in football. Basketball, we can compete. Other sports, we can compete. But when it came down to it, it's like there were times when I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recall the football game? I think this is where we get into more of the favorite moments of our time together. You remember the moment when I went up to the new superintendent, De La Torre, and I just asked him straight up, what do you put in your hair?
No, I don't remember
You
that.
don't remember that?
No.
Because we were talking about it. It was you, me, and I think it was Chris that was there. And we would always talk about like how his hair just looked perfect. Every single time it looked perfect. And we were like, what does he put in his hair? You know, it's got to be some pomade. It's got to be something, some product. And so I was like, what if I just ask him? You're like, don't do that. Like, don't go up to him. Like, that can't be your first conversation. He barely knows you. You're gonna get tackled. That's what you guys said to me. You're like, you're gonna get tackled. And I was just
I
like,
don't remember that.
I was like, I'm just gonna go up to him, see what happens. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm in charge of Hanks Media, and I tweet out, and you know, he'll retweet it and like it a couple times throughout the season. And then I was just like, I just got a question to ask you. You know, like, what do you put in your hair? And he just laughed. And then he was like, I don't know the name of it, but it's like a product. My wife gets it for me. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I just walked away. I just didn't talk to him for the rest of the night, and I'm pretty sure he didn't want to talk to me.
I don't remember that conversation. He was actually at a lot of our football games, but I just can't recall. I just can't recall for the most part whenever you ended up asking him.
Yeah. I don't know why I did that. I was stupid. I regret some tweets. Some of the things I said on Twitter were not well. Any memories? Any like favorite thing? Obviously the quotes, like the references to movies.
Oh, that still happens quite often.
Oh, for sure. Like, don't go chasing waterfalls, and everyone's just silent, and you'd be like, you just quote TLC.
Yeah.
You just hear it fill the room. Everyone's like, what?
Yeah, that was from the other guys.
Yeah. I rewatched it again, and it's still a phenomenal movie.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I tend to get that one is kind of like, let's see, memories. I know, I think we've covered. I mean, we've kind of discussed a lot of the things that we've I guess in terms of we've gone down the a trip down memory lane, that we've discussed a lot of that stuff. And no, it was good. It was good to reminisce, man. Sometimes I guess I don't do this enough, where I get an opportunity to just kind of like go back and just kind of I guess in a sense just kind of reflect on the time that I had. I mean, I put in 11 years over at Hanks, but I don't give myself much of a time to go ahead and just reflect on the time that I've had over there. So
I feel like this is the first time we've done this too.
Yeah.
Like, we have small things that we like kind of think about, but overall, like, going through it and what we did together, I mean, it's where we are now.
We could, next time we do this, what we could do is we could just talk about, like, start talking about, hot topics, stuff like that. You know, NBA season is right around the corner, so maybe next time what we could do is we could just start talking about some of that stuff as NBA season's about to kick off.
Yeah.
At the end of July. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. We can do like a weekly thing.
Well, let's do every other week because it's
busy. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
It's super busy still because we're still planning a summer school. We're still planning a graduation. We have general ideas of what that looks like. We don't have specific ideas what that looks like. So there's still a lot. There's still a ton of planning to do on this end. So in terms of being able to go ahead and say, yeah, let's do it every week, it's going to be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and it won't be like a definite thing, but just nice little refreshers because I find myself talking like just by myself a lot of these episodes.
Sure.
So I kind of want more variety. On
yeah,
the
that makes sense.
But so I mean, it allows us to get more into contact because it's been a while. I know I haven't texted you much, but
sure.
I mean, it's nice to have that one person. Like you are really the only teacher and the only like influencer, in my opinion, from like high school that I still talk to.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
yeah,
I think us like our chemistry together on a podcast would be great.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah,
cool. We'll do that the next time. We'll talk about some stuff, some wide range of topics that are happening nationally, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. We used to do it a lot in high school, so might as well do it on a platform.
Yeah. Might as well carry it on, right?
For sure. Yeah. All right. So this will do it for episode. Let me do the outro, sir, please. This will do it for episode 140 of the Bubble Let Sports Podcast. I appreciate Mr. Navarro coming in here and putting his 2 cents on some very nice memories from high school and basically the growth of Bubbleettes, in my opinion. It's really the beginning of Bubbleettes from that point on. So it's a big pleasure and an honor to have him on the podcast that really came from him and influence from him. So thank you, Mr. Navarro. We'll have you again on the podcast for sure. But this will do it. Follow on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube. We're at 79 subscribers, so on the road to 100 is getting closer and closer. And if you follow it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow it and share it on social media. So thank you again for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time on the Bubble Let Sports Podcast.
Yeah, hold on. Tell me who's your top 5 quarterbacks right now, dead or alive, huh? And how much do you care about a ring if the best player got carried by the team? Now would you lose if it been a better draft pick?